Welcome, Transformation Talk Radio listeners and podcast listeners everywhere. My name is Ellen Stewart, and I am the pushy broad from the Bronx.
She's the pushy broad from the Bronx, New York. Follow her voice, her straight talk is nice. She's the pushy broad from the Bronx, oh yeah. Don't be surprised if you wanna listen twice. Make decisions, find the right choice. Know yourself better, find your own voice. It's okay if you need help today, cause everybody needs a little push. From the pushy broad from the Bronx, New York.
I am delighted to bring you my brand new show. We just finished last week with my last episode of Everybody Needs a Little Push, and I am delighted to roll out Pushy Broad from the Bronx brand new show, Women Who Push for More. This is a show where I interview enterprising, self-aware, and confident women who strive to achieve more in every aspect of their lives. And they have learned to never settle for less than they are worth. I'm going to bring you inspiring and empowering stories of true pushy broads whose strength and courage make us all want to be women who push for more. Join me every Wednesday on Transformation Talk Radio at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. And I want to get started today with a very special guest on our show, Women Who Push for More, correspondent and producer at NJTV News, Joanna Gagis. Joanna, it's lovely to see you.
So good to see you, Ellen. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for joining me today on Women Who Push for More. I know you have a very inspirational, exciting story, and I want to start by asking you, it's very exciting for a woman to think of themselves as a producer and a news correspondent. Can you tell us a little bit how you got started and how long ago that was?
Well, a woman never reveals her age, but I guess a pushy woman is confident enough to do that. So I'll just say a lot of years ago.
A lot of years ago. Okay, so how did you...
I'm about 15 years in the business.
You are. All right, so you're a seasoned producer and correspondent.
I'll take
Yes,
that.
although you don't look that, and all the YouTubers out there will attest to that. You certainly don't. But you started your journalism career as an associate producer and an entry-level position. And tell us about where you were and what you did.
I was a Rutgers grad trying to figure out what was going to be next for me. I always wanted to be a reporter. I knew that was my vision. I knew that was my dream. Right out of college was bartending and trying to figure out how I was going to pay the bills and get to where I wanted to be. But I knew I was a Jersey girl at heart. I know you're a pushy broad from the Bronx, so I'm a pushy girl from Jersey. I knew I loved New Jersey, and quite frankly, there weren't that many opportunities in New Jersey to be on the air. So this opportunity literally rolled into my bar, a man by the name of Steve Adubato, who's worked in public television for 35 years. And he was looking for a producer. I was looking for work. So it wasn't the on-air position that I wanted, but I thought, let me get my foot in the door. Let me see whatever I can learn in this industry and see where it goes. Hindsight's 2020. Turns out that was a good decision.
It certainly was. And that also says something about women who push for more. Knowing when to seize the opportunity, correct? Here you are bartending. Some guy sits down and starts to talk to you, and you're seeing, wow, producer job opportunity, correct?
Yeah, in fact, I had to put my game face on. I was like, okay, here we go. My mom told me if I was going to bartend, do it at a high-end place where I'd rub elbows with the right people. This just literally walked into my bar, into my lap. I can't say no. So I had to serve the drink and be really assertive in that moment and have my professional journalism game face on. And it worked. And I'll tell you what, when I say it worked, it made a good impression, but I didn't get the job right there. In fact, I had to call again. I had to write an email. I had to call again. And so I wanted that job and I didn't let it go. And I kept following up until finally I had another encounter and he said, yeah, you've been following up quite a bit, huh? And I said, yeah, I want that job. You're still looking for someone? And so that's how I ended up getting the job.
A true definition of a woman who pushes for more. And how long did you stay working for Steve Adubato?
I was there for 13 years. I've spent most of my career in that company, although not as an associate producer. I started as an associate producer, pretty quickly, showed that I wanted to be there, that I wanted to take on more, that I was pushing for more. I became a line producer, which is basically handling a lot of what goes on in the control room, right? The behind the scenes of a show. And a couple years after that, there was an opportunity to become a senior producer where I took the lead on a single show. There were 4 shows that we produced at any given time. Some shows started and stopped over the years. And after becoming a senior producer, I ended up taking a really big leap. I ended up helping to create and launch a lifestyle show that I ended up hosting. But that's a whole nother thing as to how I pushed for more. I'll keep going if you don't mind.
No, you've told us a great deal as how you move from one place to the other. And I'm curious as to whether or not you were up against any other counterparts, any other male counterparts possibly for the positions, that you had to compete with, or you just kept opening your own doors. Explain that to us.
I've taken a different path than most people on TV, right? The usual path is you move to Kansas, you fight for a spot on the air, and then you've got to, elbow bump people out of your way who are also fighting for the same job. Because I wanted to be in New Jersey, and because I started in this company, it was a small company with one on-air talent, and that was Steve Adubato. I told him after just a short time, I wanted to be on the air. And it was for me, a slightly uncomfortable situation. I was relatively new. He took me on as a producer. He asked me to take on another role as a producer. And I said, well, here's the thing. I want to do something that's actually different. And he went, okay, well then we can figure that out together. So I created that opportunity for myself. And then as I grew as a producer, I also wanted to grow as an on-air talent. And so I kept pushing that door open more and more and more until I got to the point where I said, I want to host a show. And so together we developed a show, Life and Living with Joanna Gagis. So it wasn't so much that I was competing against other people as much as I was saying, I need to carve a path in this company that doesn't have a path for me, but I know what I want. And I know you see value in having me here. So let's create something that I want as well.
And you were very lucky that the people around you gave you that opportunity.
That's absolutely right.
So you were there for 13 years. About how soon from the time you started to the time that you got live on air in front of the camera?
It was actually very quick. I would say within a year. Within a year, I was doing segments. I was going out. I was doing pieces, field pieces where I was interviewing people. So it was pretty quick. And I was a little rusty. I mean, if you look back at those early tapes, it's not what it looks like now.
Well, you are a veteran after 15 years, obviously. But in the beginning, certainly were certain lessons that certainly the women out there can learn from. So can you give us an idea of what you would impart on somebody that wants to break into this business and is starting from the beginning? Where do you think they should start, and how do you think they should move their career along?
I mean, I think coming out of college, or actually it starts when you're in college, internships are the greatest opportunity for young people. And I've mentored a lot of young women over the years, especially as I took on a management leadership role as I became executive producer of the shows that we produced. But now in the news industry, and even back then when I was leading shows as a producer, it's the interns that I saw who had that spark and who weren't afraid to speak up, to ask questions and be noticed, who we remembered and who we called back. So to any young person, any young woman who has a drive, has a dream, if you're dealing with self-doubt, you need to deal with that quickly and you need to put it away, because it's the ones who speak up who really get noticed. That's my biggest piece of advice. And by the way, it doesn't matter if you figure that out 10 years later.
As long as you figure it out.
Exactly.
Do you think it was difficult for you in the beginning to speak up?
No, I've never struggled with that. What I've struggled with is keeping the focus. I've always taken on a lot. So it's taking on a lot, but making sure that what I'm taking on is actually leading me in the direction that I want to go. And I think that that's where I came to just 2 years ago, a full stop in my life, where I had accomplished a lot. I was at a certain level in that company that I'd been at for 13 years. I was at the ceiling, right? I had a show, I was executive producer of all those shows that we produced, and I realized I wanted to make a right turn, a sharp right turn. I wanted to get into a different style of journalism. I wanted to be doing daily news. And for me, that really meant actually taking a big step down in a way, or parallel, or whatever direction, it was different. It was a sharp right turn, I think is the best way to say it. And it required a lot of transformation for me.
And that's where we come to the point where we understand that in many ways we can reinvent ourselves, correct?
Yes.
But that does take a lot of courage.
Yes. And that is one of the greatest moments of my life, is allowing myself to be humble enough to say, I'm going to try something that feels very new and awkward, that I haven't been doing on a regular basis, but I had to really deep down believe in myself. And no one else was going to petition for me. No one else was going to advocate for me to get this job. This is another opportunity where I pushed for the job. And that tenacity, that grit that I found in myself in that process was one of the most rewarding things I've ever gone through.
So how did that opportunity, this current opportunity, come to you, which is producer correspondent for NJTV News?
Yeah, so again, it was just reevaluating my life, seeing where I wanted to go. You always hit a point where you say, what's next? And if what's next isn't clear, sometimes you need to stop and you need to really think about it. And that's where I was. I was at that point in my life where I wasn't sure what was next. So I thought, what do I love? What is going to excite me? And I really wanted to do something different and new, but relatively the same, right? I love New Jersey. I love covering New Jersey. And so when you look at the programming that I was doing and where I am now, it's actually very similar, and that was intentional. I wanted that. So I wanted to stay in New Jersey. I wanted to be covering the issues here in the state. So I looked to, where would I be great at that? And NJTV, my show was already airing on NJTV. I had a lot of relationships there. But I had to make the case for why I was going to be good in a role I hadn't really been in before. And I made the case.
You did, and you made the switch. So how did Steve Adubato feel about you going after 13 years?
All I can say is he was supportive of my career from day one, right? When I told him as a young producer that I wanted to be on air, he opened that door. When I told him I wanted to host a show, he opened that door together. But he's always been supportive. When I told him I wanted to do that and try something new and different, he was incredibly supportive. So, I have nothing but gratitude for the experiences and the support that I got from Steve.
So your previous show, Life and Living, I want you to tell us a little bit about that and tell us the kind of show that you do now. How is it different?
Life and Living, I got to have a lot of fun. Lifestyle is, arts and culture, food and wine in New Jersey, which actually there's a thriving food scene here in New Jersey that I loved covering. I got to talk to designers and artists and you name it. Right now, what I'm doing is more serious. I'm doing daily coverage of the news of the day in New Jersey. So I'm doing a lot more political coverage myself. I used to produce political shows, so I was doing all of that coverage, but not myself as the on-air talent. Now I am, and I love the subject matter because so often, if you live in New Jersey, you know that we're sandwiched between New York and Philly, right? So much of what happens doesn't meet, I guess, go on mainstream media. I hate to use the word mainstream media because that has a whole other kind of connotation these days, but New Jersey doesn't get the press that it needs and deserves. And so I love being a part of storytelling that's really actually impactful, that matters in people's daily lives.
And now part of that impact, I know because I have been watching some of your segments, is covering the New Jersey school situation in the midst of the pandemic and what Governor Murphy is a part of. So I understand it is wonderful to be among New Jerseyans and talk about restaurants and theater and art. But at the moment, in the midst of the pandemic, that has all kind of fallen by the wayside anyway. So the most important news stories are the ones you're covering. So how do you feel about that shift for you personally?
It's the moment I was ready for. I enjoyed having fun with the show. I loved it, but I wanted to take on that more serious role. That's what I was really, I think, craving in my life, in my professional life anyway. So I feel I feel like it was the right move for me. And I feel like it's allowed me to kind of deepen my sense of self, my sense as a journalist. It's grounded me in a lot of ways, taking on some of the biggest stories. Jan Kelly, the U.S. Supreme Court, I don't know if I'll say they cleared her, but covering the case and how the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in her case, covering the news of the day in New Jersey, news of the day, even in Washington, occasionally we'll touch on things if we had Senator Booker running for president. I just love it. I love it.
That's an absolute wonderful thing. And you've certainly brought some very interesting segments to light. And you're right. One of the reasons why I think New Jersey sometimes has difficulty immersing with credibility is because, like you said, we're between New York and Philadelphia, prominent cities, and there aren't too many prominent cities that New Jersey is noted for, right? New Jersey is mostly noted for a state, but not for one particular city that would stand out.
Right. We have Newark, we have Paterson and Camden. Those don't thrive.
Or Trenton, right, exactly.
Yeah, and Trenton. Let us not forget Trenton.
Exactly.
And it doesn't help that New Jersey has the Jersey Shore and the Sopranos at one point, right? Like the media perception of Jersey is not always wrong, but tainted, right? Slanted.
Yes, quite honestly. Look, I was born and raised New Yorker, as all of the Transformation Talk Radio listeners know, because I grew up in the Bronx. I spent 30 years in the Bronx. Now I do live in New Jersey, and all the people from New York always thought that you needed a passport to come to New Jersey. And I'm really proud to live in this state. New Jersey gets a bad rap, and I think that's very unwarranted. So I'm thrilled with the news of the day in New Jersey, especially with what Governor Murphy is doing in terms of keeping the New Jersey citizens safe during this pandemic. I think he's doing a great job of giving us some kind of a plan and some kind of leadership throughout this situation. So I'm glad you're covering it in a way that's very helpful to all of us.
And some of the stuff that we cover, it's beyond the news of the day, right? But the issues of the day. And this relates to what you do. But one of the biggest things, and it's in my coverage of kids returning to schools and in my coverage when, things started shutting down, is mental health, right? The mental health of our citizens, that's been a big focus for me too over these last several months, looking at the impact that this pandemic's had on kids, on adults, people struggling with addiction. So that's, it's a topic that I've dived into quite a bit, and people are hurting, people are struggling.
You're absolutely right, which is why I spent lots of podcast episodes on my Recovery Recharge show, which talks about coping with the pandemic. And also on Transformation Talk Radio, Dr. Pat and I talk about the fact that alcohol sales were up 500% during these past 5 months, which is a staggering amount. People are indeed struggling, not only with schools, but with their addictions because of what's going on. So it always bears a tremendous amount of coverage. And it's very astute of you as a correspondent to notice that there is a real problem during this pandemic and to report on it, which is what we all need for information.
Absolutely.
So now you're in a situation where you have your own show. And is there anything in the future for Joanna? Do you have another direction you want to take yourself?
Well, I don't have the show now because when I moved to NJTV, I walked away from the show, which was a hard decision. It was kind of like, that was my baby. I developed that show. I grew that show. It was hard to walk away from it. It was hard to leave it, but I knew I needed the change, and it's like shedding the snakeskin, right? Sometimes you have to leave behind what you first grew so that you can grow something new. I don't know. It was hard, but what's next? I ask myself that a lot. Right now, mid-pandemic, I'm just trying to get through the next school year. I've got 2 kids, 7 and 5. So we're just trying to keep our head above water. I think right before the pandemic, I was in that moment of, all right, let's evaluate. Doesn't mean I'm moving on at this moment, but I always want to have a plan, right? I always like to think, am I challenging myself enough? Am I growing enough? I think I've grown a tremendous amount in the last 2 years, even just in terms of humbling myself enough to say, there's a lot I need to learn. sometimes being pushy actually means being humble. And I really thought about that before I came on the show, because I'm a girl who will push. And if you know me, you know I'll push hard if it's something I want. But in my last push, right, I had to in a way push myself back. I had to say, put your ego aside, put your pride aside. To grow, you need to really become humble. You need to learn, you need to be uncomfortable. And I was very uncomfortable. Learning how to operate a camera, learning how to edit, learning how to turn a segment for day of air, which means you go out in the morning and you shoot it, you come back, you write, you edit your own stuff, and you get it on the air that night. So learning that process for me took so much humility. But it was such a learning experience. It's such a growth process for me. So I don't know what's next right now. I still feel every day like I'm trying to be better at the job that I do, but I feel like I'll always feel like that no matter what I do.
Women who push for more, I always believe, are women that rise to the next challenge. No matter what, you spent a good amount of time in your last position. 13 years was something that you really honed your skill. So even though you started with Steve Adubato 15 years ago, after the first year, you may have made a lot of quick moves to something completely different, but you had time to hone that for yourself over a period of 13 years. And I think that's what gracefully took you to the next step. I strongly believe that all of the women that I'm interviewing find that the women who push for more don't always push in and make opportunities where opportunities don't exist. They make opportunities where they seize opportunities that do exist. Okay, so just like you did in the beginning, where you sat there at the, as a bartender, and then Steve came over to you, and then you just said, "Oh my God, I could turn this into a job," right? It's not that you went just knocking down doors and saying, "Try me, try me, try me." The opportunity presented itself, and you didn't back down from it. That's what a woman who pushes for more does. And then it's a very good observation that you made about just because you're a pushy broad doesn't mean that you know it all. That you are humble enough to say, I want this, but I'm going to have to learn it. Right?
That's right. I used to, when I had the show Life and Living, and I still look for this type of programming now, but I used to interview women entrepreneurs. That was one of my favorite things to do. Find strong women who started a business, who found a need in the community, who were giving back, started a nonprofit. I love to seek out those strong women segments. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is there's a major difference, and I'm generalizing to be fair, but there's a major difference in the way that men and women approach growth, especially in a job, especially when there's a promotion available. A man will say, okay, there's 5 requirements. Well, I could do 3 of those. I'm going to apply for this job. And a woman will look at those 5 requirements and say, oh, I can only do 3 of those. I don't think I'm ready. And there's this difference in the way that men and women tend to approach their confidence in taking on a new challenge or taking on something new, or like you said, seizing that next opportunity. And a lot of that is just self-doubt. And so getting to the heart of that and recognizing it in yourself and being able to say, okay, I'm not going to limit myself because I haven't mastered everything. I can learn, I can grow, I can push myself. It's such an important skill.
It definitely is. And you're right. Sometimes it does distinguish us from how a man would approach it. And that's why women who push. Yes, right. You're absolutely correct. So by saying to ourselves, if I can only do 3, I can learn to do the next 2, right? Yeah. Push it one step more. And not only pushing for more in terms of the opportunities in front of us, but a woman who pushes for more like you rises to the occasion so that she can push herself further along.
Yes.
Right? A woman who pushes for more pushes herself intrinsically forward. I can do it. I have the confidence to do it. I have the self-esteem. I can do it. And if I don't yet know how to do it, I have the capacity to learn how to do it.
That's right. And by the way, a lot of women are born with a natural sense of self, right? But you can cultivate that in yourself. You can cultivate that confidence. You can and I think there's that, what's the expression? There's a special place in hell for someone who doesn't bring a woman along, or something along those lines. I don't know that I specifically endorse that expression, but I've worked really hard to mentor younger women, and I've seen a lot of young professionals who come in and maybe have a ton of skill and have the right attitude, but don't always have that confidence. And you can grow that confidence in yourself by understanding, looking back at what you've already accomplished, right? A reference point, right? Of what you know you've done and where you know you can grow and continue to grow. So it's something you can build in yourself, even if it's not natural.
And I understand also that you do additional work in addition to your correspondent and your producer work on NJTV News. Talk to us a little bit about what a board member you are and the non-for-profit organization you're a participant of, and some of the other things you do and the other organizations you work with.
Yeah, so I love talking about Oasis. We talked about Paterson a minute ago, one of New Jersey's 4 major cities. I serve on the board of a nonprofit in Paterson called Oasis, a haven for women and children. The mission and the motto is a hand out, a hand up. So we are really helping to break the cycle of poverty for women and children in Paterson. And if you know Paterson, there's a ton of poverty. There are, it's school system in a lot of ways. There's a mayor who, seems like he's trying to get things on track, but there's a lot of work to be done in that city. And the day-to-day of it is that there are a lot of families who are struggling. So we feed and clothe women, but quickly realized that wasn't enough to really break the cycle. We needed to be educating women. So you bring in a woman to educate her, but she's got kids and those kids need support. So we started adding free childcare, and then we developed an aftercare program so that kids, and sometimes they're kids of moms in the program who are taking English as a second language or getting their GED or taking college readiness classes. But some of their kids, and then open to kids in school, in the Paterson public school system, we have an aftercare program where kids can come to get them off the street, have a meal, keep them safe, but now they're working on their homework. They have one-to-one teacher support when they need it. We have a teen program, we have a teen girls program, starting a teen boys program. And so there's so many ways that just by supporting the family in that way, you really can break the cycle of poverty. We have kids who are going to go on to college who may otherwise not have. We have kids who are going to private high school because we're helping to send them there, who otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity. So I've been a board member for 3 years now. I found them because I had them on the show, and I was so taken by the executive director at the time that I said, I need to learn more and I need to get involved. Went in, started volunteering, and after a short time, they asked me to sit on the board. It's really, really, truly an honor to be a part of that organization. And when I say they're doing God's work, they are doing God's work. It's incredible.
Are they accepting donations?
Yes. We regularly accept clothing donations. That has stopped right now. We clothe the city. So people can come in and just get their bag of clothes. They're allowed to fill a bag a month. That has stopped right now for safety concerns, but literally our entire program came to a full stop, and we became an emergency food assistance program overnight. We weren't able to bring women in for any of the classes. We weren't able to bring kids in. We've been serving, I think, between 1,200 and 1,600 meals a day, which just goes to show the need in our backyard, right? Families who had nowhere else to go. We weren't open to men before the pandemic. And for a while, we were serving men on the line, and a dad came and said, I didn't know if I'd be able to come here, but he's crying. We have no food in the refrigerator, and I couldn't feed my son. So just these stories when you hear about the struggle of these families. So it's an incredible I can't say enough great things about it. And really, truly, I'm honored to be a part of it.
So tell people what the website is all about if they want to make a contribution in some way.
OasisNJ.org. And they can go online. They can send food. Right now, we're accepting food donations. We're accepting monetary donations. We would love the support. Absolutely.
And when I put this up on YouTube, I will put the name of the website so that people can go and make donations on that behalf.
Thank you. That's great.
And then also, are you still a member of Enterprising Women of New Jersey?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, schedules being what they are these days, I haven't done a whole lot there. But that's a tremendous group of women. They are some of the most powerful women across the state in business, who are pushing talk about pushy broads. These girls are trying to get other girls in the C-suite, right? So I think the numbers are abysmal. The percentage, I think it's 4% of Fortune 500 companies. I think it's less than that. I think it's 4% of major companies are female CEOs. I don't have that stat correct right now, but there is such an absence of female voices in the C-suite, the executive suites, right? The people, the CFOs, the COOs, the CEOs, the ones who are making the decisions for the companies. And so as women want equal pay, and as women want, these issues addressed, work-life balance and paid family leave, right? Things that women have been fighting for a long time. It's really hard to get there when you don't have representation in the places where those decisions are being made. So the goal of this organization is to get women in those seats so that we can start to change the culture of corporate America and when you change the culture of corporate America, you change the culture of America, right?
Without a doubt. And hopefully we can continue to change that on November 3rd, 2020, with hopefully the first woman vice president in office, which would be spectacular. No question.
I will let you speak for that as a journalist. I offer no opinion whatsoever, but we'll be covering.
Well, no matter what, it certainly would be a great lift forward for the women of the United States, regardless.
I'm always happy when I see a woman rise to a first, right? Anytime you see a woman first, that's a good thing in my mind. Anytime. And it's amazing that glass ceiling still exists in so many ways for women. It's 2020, the world's falling apart, and women still aren't where they need to be.
Right. And we can make the argument right here, right now, that pushy broads, women who push for more, could certainly help to break a lot of those glass ceilings and move things along a little quicker.
That's right.
Without a doubt. So the Enterprising Women of New Jersey, do you know if they have similar offices or similar organizations throughout the United States?
This particular group, I don't believe has nationalized. Well, they haven't nationalized, but I'm sure there are others. Although, New Jersey women tend to lead the way in a lot of things. And maybe from New York, you'd say, well, New York women do too. And maybe that's fair, but I'm a Jersey girl, so I'm going to wave that flag.
There you go. There you go. Well, I'm not going to fight you on that because I've been here for 20 years. So I certainly have a much different opinion of New Jersey than I had 20 years ago. No question.
Yeah, but Jersey girls are strong. There's no doubt. And they're tough and they push.
So where do you think you got your strength from as a strong Jersey woman? What women in your life were your biggest influencers?
My mom was always a tough cookie in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, I think I'm tougher, and for good or bad. Some of it I was born with. Maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's learned experience. Some of that toughness has been a tough exterior, right? Where you learn to be tough on the outside and maybe you don't feel so tough on the inside, but you learn how to operate. You learn how to fight to get what you need. You learn how to fight to get what you want. And then some of it, I think I was born with. I think I have a strong sense of self, and I think I'm very blessed to have that because some of the closest people in my life have seen struggle in a lot of ways that I'm really grateful that I haven't. It doesn't mean I haven't struggled. I certainly have. And like I said, sometimes I have a tough exterior, but I'm a lot softer inside than I'll let you know. But I think I've learned, quite honestly, the payoff of having that grit, right? Like every time you push and it works and a door opens, you go, oh, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do it again. And so developing that sense of learning how to push and learning how to get stronger. I think I've honed it.
And what about passing that kind of grit on to your daughter?
She's going to pass on her grit to me. She's 7. She's tough as nails. She's got a strong will. I did too. When I look at her, I see myself. I remember being a kid saying, you're not going to tell me what to do. And she's got the exact same streak. For me, you know, learning how to parent in this moment is different, I think, than how I was parented in a lot of ways. I want to support her. You know, I think the old thinking for parents was like you break the will, right? So that you get a kid to do what you need them to do. And then you hope that will like comes back together and becomes whole again when they go off to be an adult. I think we understand a lot more now. You don't want to break a will, right? You don't want to break that spirit. So my goal is to guide her, and my God, sometimes that means like my hair's falling out. Sometimes it's hard, but she's a strong young woman, and she's insightful, and she's smart, and she's probably going to be my boss someday. So.
Well, she certainly will be our definition of pushy broad, correct?
Yeah, she will. She will. And you know, I had this really amazing parenting moment this week where she wanted to try something new and she was terrified. She wanted to go down the big water slide at the pool, and past me, even when she was younger, would kind of push her to do things, right? Come on, you can do it. Come on, you can do it. And I've learned a different way with her. I've learned that to get her to do something is to stop trying to get her to do something and just support her. So she asked me to come stand at the top. And by the way, this is what like Joanna as a kid needed too. And I was able to see how when you support and you just be there and you just be present, you let someone find that inner strength on their own. And I didn't talk her into it. I didn't encourage her to do it. All I said was, whenever you're ready, you let me know and we'll go down. And we stood there for 20 minutes and she asked me 1,000 questions. And I stood there with her and I answered them. And then finally she said, okay, if you go down, then I'll go down. So I went down, I came back up, and we went down together. And just as a mom, to see her work through that and find that strength and find that courage was so rewarding. It was so amazing.
And it's basically what we talked about before, that you have to be your own pushy broad, because that's the only way that it will truly be effective.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
you can't have somebody push you. It has to come from within, no matter what. And part of the reason why I accepted that moniker for myself was that I always felt that I had the self-confidence and self-esteem to be the person that I was and to help impart that and coach that and become an empowerment coach for women around me and to help them in so many ways. But still, because I was outspoken, just like you, the connotation of pushy broad is always a negative one for society and specifically for men, because they look at pushy broads as people that are outspoken. And I always looked at outspoken as just having the ability to speak out, which is basically the dictionary definition. So understanding that you can own pushy broad and change the definition of what pushy broad actually is. And that means being proud of yourself and not being afraid to be who you are to the rest of the world. And I think that's something your daughter is learning through you.
Yeah, and you know, so many times a woman will be called pushy and a man will be called confident, right? And so society has this way of perceiving a strong woman very differently than a strong man. So it's changing that connotation, right? And making that a positive thing, even for women themselves who understand the way society views them, whether spoken or not, right? We understand from the conversations that are had around women. And when you hear other men talk about women, right? There's all those subtle messages that get sent out to us. Oh, that's, you know, you don't want to be too pushy, or you don't want to be the, you know, the bee in the room, right? But it makes people be the bee in the room.
Exactly. Be the bee in the room. In fact, one of the things that I'm going to do, and one of the things I'm working on, is to actually change the Urban Dictionary definition of pushy broad, which is a rather negative definition, and it's in fact way too negative to even read on the air. But I can just tell you that part of what I'd like to try to change is the definition, making it women who speak out and actually push for more in a really good sense. because I think this is the time. This is our time. The movement is extremely clear, just like the undercurrents of civil rights movements. I think the reinvention of the women's movement in a very strong way is happening right here, right now. And since I know what it was like back in the 60s with all of that, because I lived through that, I can feel that it's being generated again. Can you feel that in the news world? Are you feeling a rumbling and a sense of change?
Absolutely. I mean, 2016 was a pivotal year for women, right? With the Me Too movement. And when you look at, when history looks back at this, there's going to be, certainly there were times of unrest, but in those times of unrest, there was opportunity for growth. And I think 2016 brought for women this poignant moment where women said, we're going to speak up and we're going to talk about this thing that's been happening to all of us. And when I say to all of us, more women than we'll ever understand have experienced sexual abuse, right? I posted publicly that I said me too. I raised my hand and said me too publicly. And that was a hard thing for me to do. But I realized that if I'm a person who has a platform and has a voice, how many other women are there who don't? And so it's my responsibility to speak up on behalf of those who I know will never be able to, won't have that audience, won't have that platform. But yeah, there's a movement, there's a shift. And I think there's a collective understanding for women that things are not okay, that status quo is not okay. The way we've been treated needs to change, but it's the way we treat ourselves, the way we speak about ourselves, understand ourselves. And with any movement, you're going to have it's like a tide, right? It's going to come in strong and wane, but come back. But there has to be that collective coming together of women to keep pushing forward and keep demanding more and different and better.
And that's what I hope with this new show, Women Who Push for More, because the Pushy Broad from the Bronx wants to be able to perpetuate that movement, which is why on my website, I want you to join the community, because it is a community of women that understand that that we can take control, we can take our own power, and we can really make a difference. And that's why I'm delighted to have someone like you on the show. Can you give us some parting words, some things that maybe we should know that you could leave with us about someone that maybe wants to start this career, or just about what it means to be a woman who pushes for more?
I think for me personally, I have a commitment to myself that I'm never going to stop pushing, right? I'm always going to keep pushing. And that's going to mean a lot of different things. It's going to mean pushing to better myself as a person, pushing to better myself as a professional, as a mom. And that change is often painful. Change sounds pretty and it looks glamorous when you see someone's career on the outside, right? Or you see someone's transformational growth or weight loss or whatever it is. It looks pretty, but it's usually gritty and painful and ugly and hard. But through that transformation, that is the only way to get to growth, right? That transformation is the only way to get to growth. So I have a commitment to keep working, whatever that is. And I know that those opportunities will open up themselves. I know there will be something else for me, and I just want to be ready when that moment comes. And if I'm not ready, I'm going to do the same thing I did. I'm going to dig in, work as hard as I can, and I'm going to get myself ready, and probably have to push and sell until I get it.
Until you move on to the next thing.
Right.
That's great. Okay. Well, I'm very pleased to have Joanna Gagis, correspondent and producer of NJTV News, with us today. Thank you so much, Transformation Talk Radio listeners, and thanks for tuning in to my brand new show, Women Who Push for More. Please join me next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
This is Ellen Stewart, the Pushy Broad from the Bronx, saying thanks for listening, and remember, everybody needs a little push.
From the Pushy Broad from the Bronx, New York.